After the most turbulent development cycle I've ever seen, Granblue Fantasy Relink is miraculously an extremely successful JRPG with the third highest concurrent player count on Steam for that category. But could a development cycle this chaotic actually produce such an outstanding game? Or does Relink's hype as such a long-awaited game and reputation as one of the largest mobile games in Japan carry it to success in spite of its quality? I want to answer that by starting with something a lot of JRPGs and stories in general tend to stumble on a bit: the pacing of the story. Pacing can be a hidden killer of an otherwise excellent story. I'm sure you've heard the classic, just keep watching, it gets really good later on. This is, generally speaking, a problem of pacing. If this is a story about saving the world and your main cast of characters spend large portions of time doing things that are not saving the world, the audience may quickly grow bored with what's going on. It's all well and good to deliver some special seashells to a guy who misses the ocean, but does that really have anything to do with the main quest? Games do this all the time, and it often ends up with the game being far longer than it had to be. Equally, however, it harms the focus of the story itself. It's really hard for me to care about saving the world when my party has time to collect trinkets on the beach. Ideally, a well-paced story connects nearly every single event with the main plot while gradually and consistently raising the stakes throughout. So if the story is about stopping a dragon from destroying the kingdom, then going to a forest to get a legendary sword to use in that fight makes sense since it's directly related to the main goal of slaying the dragon. A great story might even have the dragon destroy a nearby village that the player has been to before to really show what's at stake here if the hero fails. Now this dragon isn't just a scary idea, it's a genuine threat that you've seen the direct effects of. Ideally, the story continues to ramp up like this. The hero gets stronger, maybe loses a friend or a mentor along the way, learns a valuable lesson, and finally defeats the dragon to save the kingdom. It's a very simple structure, but by ensuring that you adhere to these rules of always making events relevant to the plot and gradually raising the stakes, you can create a story that's interesting and engaging from start to finish. Granblue Fantasy Relink follows these rules almost flawlessly. The game gets started shockingly fast and never really slows down. Your goal from nearly the very start of the game is to defeat this person, and everything you do, everyone you meet, and every monster you face are all important to completing that main goal. There is no sidetracking, there are no slow patches that make your friend go, don't worry, it gets better later, because it's great from the start till the end. Now, an important thing to note is that the pacing here is phenomenal, but that doesn't mean the story is too. This game doesn't have a plot that'll have you ruminating on it for weeks after the credits roll. It's a simple story about a bad person being bad and good people being good. However, there are some fun, if not a bit predictable twists in here, along with pretty satisfying moments throughout the story. It's good, nothing great, nothing terrible, but the pacing really does help elevate it to a genuinely solid and enjoyable experience. Just like how you can help elevate my self-worth by pressing this funny red button. Something that worried me far more than the story, however, was the gameplay. More specifically, I worried about it feeling dated. So the fundamental principles of storytelling haven't really changed much in the past few thousand years, but gameplay is a bit different. Games are changing constantly, and despite the fact that plenty of games have had the same amount of development time as Relink, I mean Final Fantasy 16 started just 2 years prior, not many have had the same delays and turbulent development cycles. My concern was that because this game was planned for release over 4 years ago, it would feel a little off. This is hard to really put into words, but I guess I was worried that because of all these delays, it would lack a certain refinement, focus, and polish that most great games have. I remember how excited and intrigued I was after seeing the early trailers and showcases for this game, but after each delay, I gradually began to believe that we'd never even see this game at all, let alone a good version of it. So there was this surreal feeling when I fought the first boss of this game, that same boss that we had seen in showcases a dozen times. I couldn't believe it was actually real in the first place. But what really amazed me more than anything was that the spectacle felt exactly the same, and little did I know it would only get better. Of course, I'm not going to show that because of spoilers, but believe me when I say I honestly could not have imagined what this game would be able to pull off. I mean, the first boss alone, skip to this timestamp if you don't want any spoilers for the first boss, I'll give you a second, has this excellent build up to it. You're introduced to it in the story as just some wind that's been scaring off the local goblin population. You eventually make your way to the source of this wind, an abandoned mineshaft that looks like a strong breeze could knock the entire thing down, which is exactly what happens. The primeval god, as they call it, tears through the mines, destroying even the ground that you walk on. This creates an exhilarating chase sequence where the caves that your party is in are collapsing all around you as you desperately try to escape. I really want to talk more about some of the best spectacles in this game since it really does only go up from here, but I believe those are best experienced for yourself. With all of that said, a spectacle is hollow if not for the gameplay within it. If the gameplay is mediocre, the spectacle can be as astonishing as it wants. It'll still effectively just be a slightly interactive cutscene. So let's talk about the gameplay and the most dramatic thing that happened during the development of this game. When this news first broke, I was convinced that this game would never see the light of day. I was sure this would turn Relink into one of gaming's what-ifs, in the same vein as Knights of the Old Republic 3, Titanfall 3, or even Xenoblade X2. Even in the best case scenario, even if we did somehow see this game one day, I couldn't possibly believe that it would ever live up to what was initially proposed. The reason I was so overwhelmingly pessimistic was because Platinum Games, the team tasked with co-developing Relink alongside Cygames, left. Now, granted, they didn't just pack up and leave or text Cygames on a Sunday night saying that they wouldn't be in on Monday and then just never show up again. No, their contract just ended. Initially, this game was supposed to launch alongside Granblue Fantasy Versus, but after the launch of Versus in early 2020, we still didn't even have a release window for Relink. And later on, when we would finally get a release window of 2022, that year would come and go with still no game to speak of. Countless delays, a game that showed up 4 years after the planned release date, and a team that wasn't even the same as when they started development. Needless to say, things were looking hopeless. And that's why I'm so shocked, so genuinely stunned that the gameplay of Granblue Fantasy Relink is absolutely incredible. There are two big reasons the gameplay here is able to succeed. We'll start with the depth. So the depth of this game is very similar to that of Monster Hunter. Wow, shocker, the guy with MH in his name is talking about Monster Hunter again. Okay, hang on, just let me cook. So every single character in this game has their own moveset and special attributes, along with their own personal skills that they can use in combat. Let's look at two examples. Lancelot is an aggressive character all about speed and constantly pressuring your opponent with non-stop attacks. After enough consecutive hits, his blades will become coated in ice, enhancing his attacks until the end of the combo. Basically, you're encouraged and rewarded for going all out and being as aggressive as possible. This is then further improved by the fact that you can use his strong attack as a dodge, allowing you to continue your assault while remaining evasive. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got Siegfried, a great sword user with a focus on hitting so hard that preservation is no longer a concern. His lunge attack grants him super armor that lets him charge straight through practically anything or just continue his combo through an enemy's counteroffensive. His light attacks, or at least they're called light attacks, can be enhanced by timing your inputs with his swings. This creates a really satisfying state of flow where you're consistently timing your swings and lunges to maximize your potential damage output. Every single one of the game's characters has this level of depth to them. They all have a different game plan, whether it's completing combos to strengthen your skills or planting various roses across the battlefield for different effects. But this barely even scratches the surface of what really makes this game so much fun. See, where Relink takes things a step further, where it really starts to stand out, is with its excellent use of customization. Every character has 4 skill slots which you can use to equip just as many special moves with varying effects. For example, the Captain's Panacea is an AoE heal, Zeta's Infinite Wonders launches a beam across the field that weakens enemies to her next attacks, and Catalina's Light Wall can nullify damage for a short period of time. What's really important about these skills, however, is that every single character gets about 20 of them. If you do the math, that's about 4,845 skill combinations. Granted, a fair chunk of those are going to be pretty similar, but I think you get the idea. Let's go back to the Captain for a second. I can build them to be a purely offensive unit with skills like Overdrive Surge, Decimate, and Regenlave, or I can go for a far more support-heavy build with skills like Phalanx, Panacea, and Revive. See, what makes this system so cool is that 2 people could play the exact same character in 2 completely different ways. The same character can fill different roles on your team, you know, kinda like Monster Hunter. The fact that this game is even out is surprising, but the fact that it's this good is nothing short of a miracle. After an extremely concerning development cycle, it was somehow still able to beat the odds, and I really have to give the team at Cygames props for that. Granblue Fantasy Relink, by all metrics, honestly shouldn't even exist, let alone in this form, but I think just about anyone who plays this game will be glad that it does.